it was announced that the second prequel show for HBO will be coming out in the near future. It was announced that it will be following the Targaryen storyline, and specifically following the book the of Blood and Fire.
Fire and Blood.
Fire and Blood, sorry. And it's interesting because it starts about 300 years before the Game of Thrones show on HBO, with the Targaryen conquest, and then kind of follows their lineage. I have a feeling we'll be talking about some of the actors that played the Targaryens in Game of Thrones as we wrap up the show. But how are you feeling about this this prequel and what it's going to be detailing?
Right. Yeah. So this is the second prequel pilot that's been ordered. That's coming off of the Age of Heroes Long Night pilot that they already shot with Naomi Watts at the forefront. They just did the pilot. They haven't actually greenlit that show yet. But that one obviously set thousands of years in the past, right? The time of Bran the Builder and all that stuff. Now this one, as you said, the Targaryen, Targaryen story starting with the Aegon's conquest. That's 300 years before the show, so that's in turn a large swath of TV history time to pick from, but also a lot closer to the show that 40 million people are familiar with. And depending on how they frame this, I mean, if you wanted, you could do seasons from the start with Aegon's conquest and advance up a few years. And the rumor is that it would start with the Dance with Dragons, which is about 150 years before Robert's Rebellion, which kicks off the Game of Thrones story everyone knows. And that's that's just a rumor, but that's honestly one of the events that people have had atop the list. I think when we first talked about the prospect of all those pilots that were ordered a year and a half ago or so, that was, one of the top choices for everyone. And the question, of course, was the Dance with Dragons. This is when there's lots of dragons alive still, and they're fighting against each other because it's a Targaryen civil war, right? And that sounds expensive, and we already know HBO is up against it when their final season of Game of Thrones cost $15 million an episode, and they couldn't show you much of a direwolf because they already had to spend all the money on the dragons, and that was only 3 dragons, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to handle when there's like 15? A lot, and these are also 80, 100-year-old dragons that are a lot bigger than Drogon was, who was only like 5 or whatever. So really exciting premise. It'd definitely be a go for it concept, but I actually think it's kind of smart because Targaryens, Starks, Hightowers, all Martells, all the houses and cities and names people know would be in the show if that's when it took place. And I think that could really rope people back in because we know the story is compelling and exciting and kind of has all the backstabbing palace intrigue and also the crazy set pieces that we come to love from Game of Thrones itself. So I think it's a great idea. I'm just curious if they can do it at the scale that it needs to be done at to be good.
Yeah, I have to imagine that if they're picking this and they're already anticipating that, so I guess it's going to be about the sustainability of that scale. Mm-hmm. I have no doubt they're going to come out guns blazing and try to make this a success right off the bat. But how they can sustain that when that budget's going to get eaten up pretty quickly, I think that can pretty much also guarantee that we're not going to be getting a lot of big named actors for this. Like you have Naomi Watts headlining the other prequel, but I imagine they'll probably go similar to the way Game of Thrones had maybe like one when it started off. Sean Bean, I guess, would probably be the one that you would say, and then you kind of fill it out with quality actors but maybe don't have that name recognition, which I think is fine. And I actually I have a lot of faith in HBO to find actors who will do a suitable job. So I'm here for it. As you said, picking the Targaryens or the Starks or any house like that people are invested in is definitely the way to go to kind of rejuvenate that interest. I think the more obscure you go with Thrones, the more you're going to alienate those fans that aren't aware of these stories on a deeper basis.
Yeah, and in case you didn't know, this is obviously Benioff and Weiss are not involved with this. This is Ryan Condal, who's known for Colony, and then the the Age of Heroes Long Night show is with Jane Goldman. So new blood for HBO. But I mean, I would assume if they do go through with these shows, take them to order, you have to figure Game of Thrones is in the title, right?
Yeah.
Just from a marketing standpoint, right?
Game of Thrones, Fire and Blood already has a good ring to it.
For
Why
sure.
would you change that?